All right, today we are diving deep into a massive and frankly wild online theory called the cosmic arc. This thing is a beast. It's a huge narrative that tries to connect 2,000 years of history, technology, and theology. And it all points to one very specific date in our near future.
So we're actually going to start at the end. The whole theory builds towards this single climax, an event it calls the crown ignition. According to the source material, on February 15, 2026, a new kind of global grid goes live, and its purpose is to create what it calls a digital firmament, basically a synthetic reality designed to trap human consciousness.
Now, to even begin to understand what the theory is claiming about 2026, you first have to look at the three key milestones in its modern-day timeline. It connects Operation Warping Speed back in 2020 as the critical setup, the Crown Ignition in 2026 as the main activation event, and then something called the Orion Facility in 2028 as the next big phase of this new energy system.
Okay, so let's break that down. What's actually under the hood here? What is the technology that this theory alleges is at the very heart of this Crown Ignition event? What are the nuts and bolts that supposedly make this whole thing possible?
This is where it gets really interesting. The source material presents this duality. Publicly, Helion Energy's fusion tech is hailed as this amazing breakthrough for clean, limitless power for all of us. But the theory completely reframes it. It says, no, this is something else. It's an artificial sun built for one purpose, to power a synthetic world.
The theory then plugs this new energy source into this much bigger ecosystem, one it claims was built by OpenAI's Sam Altman. It's laid out as a trinity of control, kind of like a three-legged stool. You've got Helion providing the raw power, the artificial sun. You've got OpenAI providing the brains, the artificial mind. And then you've got Worldcoin providing the digital ID system, the artificial soul, needed to manage everyone inside this new reality.
And here, we see the specific trigger the theory claims will be used. It's not a slow rollout. It's a single, synchronized energy pulse of 1.3 gigawatts, a planetary heartbeat, they call it, that's just powerful enough to ignite the ionosphere and switch this entire grid on, all at once.
But hang on. For a global pulse to affect every single person, the theory argues there has to be some kind of receiver inside the human body. And to find that, the timeline tells us we need to rewind back to 2020.
So, the source material points to graphene oxide as the key ingredient here. Why? Because of its really unique electromagnetic properties. The theory claims it was introduced into people's bodies to act as a huge, distributed network of nanoantennas, or rectennas, all just sitting there waiting to receive a very, very specific signal.
So, the big question is, what does the theory claim will happen when that massive 1.3 gigawatt pulse actually hits this alleged internal antenna system? Well, it describes three possible outcomes. One is neural entrainment, to basically force everyone into a hive mind state. Another is a massive physiological purge, and the third is a full-on digital upload that syncs a person's consciousness directly into the AI grid.
But why? What's the ultimate goal of a grid like this? To understand the alleged intent behind it all, the narrative has to jump way, way back in time to the dawn of the space age and its hidden connections to the occult and the military.
The theory draws a straight line from the occult rituals of this guy, Jack Parsons, a brilliant rocket pioneer and one of the founders of NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. It zeroes in on a ritual he did in 1946, allegedly to open a portal to another dimension. And right after, he's quoted as saying, "I have opened a portal that can never be closed." And at the exact same time this is happening, the narrative points over to Operation Paperclip, the post-war program that brought all those Nazi scientists to the US. The theory argues this wasn't just about getting rocket technology. It was a full-on integration of their occult Black Sun ideology right into the heart of the American military-industrial complex. Now, this whole part of the theory really hinges on one massive idea, that we all live inside an enclosed system, what ancient texts used to call the firmament. And it's not meant as a metaphor. The theory says it's a literal physical barrier dome over the Earth. So if you believe there's a physical barrier over your head, what are you going to do? You're going to try to break it. And that, the theory claims, led to military operations like Fishbowl back in 1962. The source alleges that those high-altitude nuclear bombs weren't weapons tests at all, but a desperate, failed attempt to literally shatter this dome. And when that failed, well, the plan changed. If you can't get out, you lock down what's inside.
But according to this timeline, for any of that 20th century space deception to even be possible, humanity first needed a kind of software update, a patch to our collective consciousness that actually happened centuries earlier, during the Renaissance.
The theory frames the big shift from a geocentric, Earth-centered model to a heliocentric, sun-centered model not as some great scientific discovery, but as a deliberate theological move. The goal, it claims, was to change our cosmic address, to take us from a vertical reality, where heaven is literally right above us, to a horizontal one, where Earth is just a tiny speck lost in a meaningless void, effectively hiding the location of God or any divine authority.
And that brings us all the way to the beginning. We're at the very start of this 2,000-year timeline. According to the source material, this is the original sin, the event that supposedly made this whole centuries-long containment plan necessary in the first place. The source claims that the resurrection of Christ wasn't just a religious miracle, it was a cosmological event, a system crash, a hack that broke the fundamental rules of our reality. And in doing so, it created a permanent exit from the simulation or fallen world, a backdoor that could never be patched or closed.
So what was the immediate reaction to this system breach? Well, as it's told in the Gospel of Matthew, it was a disinformation campaign. The theory presents this very act, bribing the Roman guards to lie about what happened to the body, as the very first cover-up. It was the original template, the playbook that has been used for every major conspiracy ever since.
So, wow, we've traveled from 2026 all the way back to 33 AD. Let's pull the camera back now and put this whole timeline together and see how the source material tries to connect all these seemingly random moments into one single continuous story.
And this slide really lays it all out. It presents this unbroken narrative arc, where the simple disinformation campaign of 33 AD slowly evolves into the hermetic magic of the Renaissance, which then becomes the occult rocketry of the 1940s, then the biotech of 2020, and it all culminates in the fusion energy pulse of 2026. Each step is presented as a direct reaction to the last, a continuous 2,000-year effort to contain that original breach.
And that leaves us here with the final, really provocative question that the source material itself asks. It frames this crown ignition not as an inevitable endpoint, but as a moment of decision. It boils everything down to a choice between the artificial light of a synthetic, contained reality or the true light from beyond a firmament that was allegedly breached 2,000 years ago.